Minister of Finance and the World Bank on Wednesday hold the first ever steering committee meeting on the turnaround allocation for the Gambia. The meeting took place at the Sir Dawda Kairaba Jamaras Conference Center in Bijilo. Africa TV's Aizatu B.I. Kujabi has more details of that in this report.
The Gambia's turnaround allocation is intended to support the country in pursuing macroeconomic reforms and performance to accelerate a transition out of fragility and build resilience amid economic hardships. The turnaround strategy is being implemented by a steering committee chaired by the Gambia's finance minister and co-chaired by the World Bank Group and the United Nations Resident Coordinator. Finance Minister CDK M. Keita said the gathering is the steering committee's first meeting since the elaboration and the adoption of the turnaround allocation strategy and called for continued efforts to sustain the gains achieved so far.
This is the first meeting of the steering committee since the elaboration and adoption of the turnaround allocation strategy. While significant strides have been made in key areas such as transitional justice, macroeconomic reforms and performance, stabilization of the government finances, youth employment and state-owned enterprise reforms, the government under the leadership of His Excellency President Adama Barrow is convinced that continued effort is critical to sustain these gains and consolidate the transition and reconciliation process, political stability, and inclusive and broad-based growth for enhanced poverty reduction. Such initiatives will have to be founded on solid policy and institutional arrangements, improve human capital development outcomes, and enhance resilience.
He added that the turnaround allocation is aimed at enhancing and strengthening institutions, transitions, and build resilience to achieve good governance and sustainable development. Mr. Keita continued that the 5 strategic goals were developed after a true analysis.
The analysis led to the identification of 5 strategic goals. 1. Governance and institution transitional justice, with the objective to enhance and improve human rights, access to justice, and good governance. 2. Security and political stability, focusing on political stability and security sector reform as a way to restore trust between citizens and the state and continue the positive transition trajectory. Land management, environment, and climate change, to enhance sustainable management and conservation of the environment, natural resources for increased resilience and equitable ownership. Human capital development to deliver and improve access to basic services. And finally, inclusive growth and economic stability to reduce poverty and promote economic and social equality. These goals are very much in synchrony with the priorities of the Green Recovery Focused National Development Plan 2023 to 2027, which will also be adopted soon. The turnaround allocation strategy creates significant additional resources on top of the existing IDA allocation.
The World Bank resident representative, Ms. Faber, offers details more on the turnaround allocation.
So what is the turnaround allocation? The Fragility, Conflict, and Violence envelope of the World Bank provides resources to IDA countries. So IDA countries are the countries, low-income countries that benefit from our International Development Association assistance, of which the Gambia is one. And it provides resources to IDA countries that are facing different kinds of FCV groups. So Fragility, Conflict, and Violence is FCV in our parlance. So these are supplemental resources that are provided in addition to a country's normal performance-based allocation. And these top-up resources enable IDA to target and tailor its support to the prevailing conflict and fragility dynamics specific to each eligible country. The turnaround allocation is one of the FCV envelopes. It supports countries emerging from either conflict, social, political crisis, or disengagement, and where we see a window of opportunity for IDA to either re-engage or intensify its engagement to support these countries to pursue major reforms to accelerate the transition out of fragility and build resilience.
On November 3, 2021, the government of the Gambia received the World Bank management's approval to access the IDA 19 turnaround allocation, allowing the Gambia to access a 125% to top of its performance-based allocation of IDA resources. Critical milestones identified in the Gambia's turnaround strategy have been achieved, and this enabled the country's continued access to the turnaround allocation resources for fiscal year 2023. For African News, ICTBI Kujabi.